The next three topics relate back to the dependent and independent clause. The first is a sentence fragment. A sentence fragment looks like a complete sentence, but is only a fragment of a sentence. And there are a few reasons why it might be a fragment. It might be a dependent clause, which is disguised as an independent clause. It might be an independent clause, except that it's missing a verb or its subject. And in many cases, writers will write a sentence assuming that you know what the verb or subject is. And this is unacceptable in technical writing. So our example here shows a sentence fragment. The technician sampled all applicable media, including the air. So the first sentence is an independent clause. It's a complete sentence. The second sentence is just a fragment, including the air. There's no verb in that sentence. So there are a few different ways we can fix this. One is to totally recast the second sentence and write it with a subject and a predicate. The technician sampled all applicable media. Air was included in the sampling. So in this example, air was included. We have a subject and a predicate. The second corrected sentence has the dependent clause included in the same sentence as the independent clause. And as we mentioned earlier, it's separated by a comma. The technician sampled all applicable media, including the air. So here we've corrected it by including both in one sentence, an independent clause plus a dependent clause. There's a special type of fragment which occurs when people make lists. And this happens when you have a full independent clause sentence followed by a list of objects that are not accompanied by a verb. So often we have the introductory sentence, and we can then include the list by combining it with a dash or making a whole new sentence. So I've shown two corrections here. The technician sampled all applicable media, period. New sentence, samples included air, water, soil, vegetation, and tissue. So in this second sentence, we now have a complete sentence. The second correction uses a dash to combine the list into the first sentence. The technician sampled all applicable media, air, water, soil, vegetation, and tissue. And note that when I'm speaking out loud, the second sentence sounds exactly like our incorrect fragment from the example. It's only in writing that we can see the difference. Here I've used a dash instead of a full stop. Now the next two issues, the comma splice and the fused sentence, are almost the opposite problem. In both of these examples, we have two independent clauses within the same sentence, and they are joined incorrectly. With a comma splice, two independent clauses are joined by a comma with no other word, such as and, because, so, etc., to join the sentences together. In our example, the cows had eroded the soil, the rain no longer recharged the groundwater. These are two independent clauses. Using our trick from before, we can cover half the sentence, and we see that it says, the rain no longer recharged the groundwater. This is a complete independent clause. This sentence can stand on its own. If we cover this half, we're left with, the cows had eroded the soil. This is also a complete sentence. With a comma splice, we have four different ways to correct it. We can join them with a semicolon, we can use the word and, we can use two separate sentences, or we can rewrite one clause to be a dependent clause. And you can see I've done all four of these below. The first uses a semicolon. Simply replacing the comma with a semicolon makes it a complete correct sentence. The second example, I just added the word and now we have a complete sentence. In the third example, I've replaced the comma with a period, and now we have two correct complete sentences. And in the fourth example, I've added what's called the coordinating conjunction. I've used the word so. Now that one follows the other. So the rain no longer recharged the groundwater is now a dependent clause, which is attached to our independent clause, the cows had eroded the soil. So all four of these are correct, and it depends on how you'd like to make the point to determine which way to correct it. The next example is similar. This is a fused sentence. This is just like a comma splice, except it doesn't have a comma. So we have two independent clauses joined together without any punctuation. This is also called a run-on sentence. The cows had eroded the soil. The rain no longer recharged the groundwater. In this case, we have the exact same corrections that we made with the comma splice. We can use a semicolon to connect two independent clauses within the same sentence. We can use the word and. We can separate these into two complete sentences, or we can rewrite one of the clauses to make it a dependent clause dependent on the independent clause and make one complete sentence. Notice that we do have semicolon, dashes, and other punctuation coming up soon in our topics. So we'll go over some of these again. Now have a look at the links I've provided to the online writing lab and the Strunk and White document to learn more about fused sentences and comma splices.